Dialogue, brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries. In the weeks ahead, you will see these and other programs by various denominations.
Seems almost like ancient history now, at least in my mind. 2.5 years ago, a war breaking out in the Middle East called Desert Storm. We want you to stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue today because we're going to talk about options for peace, nonviolence, through the University of Texas and here in our local community. Thank you for watching. Be with us.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue. Where do you go when you're concerned about the growing violence in a community, in a nation, and in the world? In January of 1991, a group of people in Austin and connected with the University of Texas got together and decided to say something about their concern regarding Desert Storm, Gulf War, and indeed all of violence in our society. And today on our program we have two of those individuals from the University of Texas who invite you to be a part of a conference that's going to be held here in Austin. I'd like you to meet Antonella Olson, who is a professor at the University of Texas in the language department, and also Dr. Les Kurtz, who's with the University of Texas. Antonella and Les, welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue.
Thank you.
Antonella, you're an Italian, and you were there here. And in January of '91, you experienced a concern about what was happening. Can you talk a little bit about your feelings of what was going on in your mind and some of your colleagues at the University of Texas?
Yes, well, first of all, it started as a personal commitment, involvement to this cause. I was very shocked by this war. It wasn't the first one that I have, you know, to be a witness of, but this time I really felt like I should be more involved, come out, even though Austin is not my native city. I still feel like I should be part of this community because I knew that people from the community of Austin were getting active to, you know, to be witness of another side of the story, you know, people against war, people against violence. And I felt like I should be there this time, you know, not be afraid of not being part of the American culture. Although I live here for many years, you know, you still feel like you belong to another country. But this time I did, and I'm glad I did because I got much closer with Les and with many other people that really meant a lot to me.
I'm a product of the 60s and the Vietnam era, and I remember the same type of experience. I was in seminary during those years, and we were wondering from college and seminary days, where do we go? How do we get together to talk about what's happening in the area of war and violence? And what about the message of what we call the kingdom of God, the message of peace? Les, you were a part of that also, that concern back in January of '91. And what came out of that?
Well, a group of us got together and began talking about the need for some kind of peace studies program at the University of Texas. And in fact, we end up calling it Peace and Conflict Studies because we want to talk about some of the connections between interpersonal violence and international violence and the violence at all levels of our lives, because it's one of the major difficulties we seek to find some kind of solution to these days.
So the concern was not simply only the war in the Gulf War, but rather it was also the entire violence that is a part of our society. We have one of the biggest concerns citizens have in America today has to do with violence, and we've seen the violence in Florida and here in Austin, and so the concerns you have with peace studies has to do not only with peace on the international scale, but rather a nonviolent approach to life locally too. Is that correct?
That's right. In fact, what's happened is very interesting in the last couple of decades in American universities. There's been a tremendous growth in peace and conflict studies programs, and in fact there were about 3 in 1970, and there are over 250 now around at American universities. And it's actually an international movement. A lot of universities in Europe and elsewhere, and we were concerned that a lot of things were happening both in terms of teaching and research and trying to think about these issues in a serious way, but not very systematically at the University of Texas. This is one of the few universities in the country where there's one of the few major universities where there's not a program.
Did you all develop a group of people then who became interested in going to the university administration and saying, we'd like to have a peace studies program? Is that what happened?
Yes, well, we get together as a reaction, you know, to the war, but not just to leave it, to finish there. I mean, we really want to create something. And with Les, Aurinka Candes, another faculty member of UT, we got together to not just talk about this war, but to talk about the possibility of create this peace and conflict program at UT.
All right, that's been a couple years ago. Now, where have we gone in this interim of time? Have we been able to get that type of program established at the university?
Well, it's complicated, of course, to set up a new program, and especially in times of tight budgets and so on. And at first, the administration was a little hesitant. The president, the person who was then president of UT, didn't even want to meet with us to talk about it. And so at one point, we decided that we should just, in fact, have a program, that we didn't need the administration to tell us that it was okay. And so we thought at some point we still wanted to make it official, but we have quite a lot of leeway in our work. We can decide to some extent what we teach and what we do our research on and that sort of thing. And so we decided at one point that we have a peace and conflict studies program at UT, and we're going to work on it. Mm-hmm. So we set up a conference on nonviolence. We began establishing some courses. I taught a course in peace and conflict studies through the sociology department. The first time I offered it, I had over 200 students there.
Interesting. So that says something about the interest that students have, that they're not as lethargic as some people say the students of today are, having some of the spirit maybe of the 60s and those concerns that we had in those days about peace and justice. Did you do the same then? You're in the language area.
I teach Italian, and we don't teach, you know, theory or anything like that, but I like to think at least that we don't teach just the language. We don't. We really start since the very beginning, teach about culture, how knowing different culture can help in this long way toward peace. I think it's a very important beginning.
What about culture? You come from the Italian culture. You come to the United States. You love it here? Is it a pretty good place?
Yes, I like it. It's not always easy, you know. I mean, sure. I haven't changed much, but no, I do like it. I mean, I do like Austin. I do like the way people get involved in things. I do like my students. I mean, they're so excited.
They have some passion,
learning.
The students of today?
Yes, I found it, at least in the Department of Italian, I really see people very, very interested in what's happening there. I mean, that's great. That's really give me, you know, strength to teach them with the same energy and enthusiasm.
And because of your cultural interest and coming from another background and coming to this, do you see that the University of Texas is becoming open?
I think so. I feel, yes, I think so.
Because as I understand, at this point, it's not an official peace studies program.
No.
It's what you are doing, Les, and your level and other professors. Do you find your colleagues, this may be a very difficult question for you to answer, but do you find your colleagues supportive, or is it just a small group of you who are interested in this?
We've gotten a surprising amount of support, because there are several different levels of support. There are a lot of our colleagues who say, great, go ahead, do it. And then there are some who are a much smaller group, of course, who are willing to actually get involved. And what we're hoping is that over time, if we institutionalize a program so it's actually an official program, and we also create some energy around this idea, that gradually some of our other colleagues will be brought into it. And I think, I mean, this is the purpose of other programs. We have a women's studies program, for example, a religious studies program at UT. What it does, you put the courses in the catalog, people begin thinking about, oh, yes, maybe I'll teach, there's a really vital program going on here in women's studies or peace studies or religious studies. And I think, you know, maybe I'll teach a course in that in a couple of semesters. And so gradually, I think the momentum begins to build.
I see.
And this is part of what needs to happen, I think, at the university. Is we're not going to get millions of dollars from the Pentagon to do this kind of work. UT gets millions of dollars from the Pentagon, but for different ways of dealing with conflict. And our resources are not going to be financial, although we could use some financial resources. And probably for the long-term health of the program, we have to get some, although we don't need the same kinds of resources as the military research programs.
But Les, you and Antonella seem positive and upbeat about the possibility and the future of a peace studies course, that as you put courses into the curriculum, that you become involved in them, as other professors become involved in them, that it'll become a part of the official process of the university and the curriculum of the university. Is that correct?
Yes, I feel even from last year conference and this year conference, I feel that there are many more people from UT, faculty member of UT involved. We didn't have too many on the first conference. I think the community group was more involved than UT.
Well, let's kind of move in that direction then. Out of this discussion that started in January of '91 with the Desert Storm war, then out of that came this group that was interested in these peace studies programs. And then a conference kind of evolved, and that conference started, we had our first one last year in '92, is that correct? Talk a little bit about that. You were gone, Les. You were in China, is that right?
I was in China as a visiting professor there, so I missed the conference.
So this will be your first conference to attend. But Antonella, you were there. And talk a little bit about how that conference developed and what were some of the things that happened from your observation of that first conference last year, because we want the people watching Austin Faith Dialogue to know that there are exciting things happening and there are options for them. As people of goodwill and as people of faith, we want them to know about these conferences and opportunities that connect the University of Texas, and now this year Huston-Tillotson College, and then also the community at large. So last year it was the University of Texas and the community.
And the community, see. Yes, actually for me that was very important, this link, you know, among UT and the outside, the community groups. I like to mention the name of a few persons that really make that possible. And first of all, Frank Wright, who really was our leader, kind of took the place of Les while he was gone, and Irene Candes, which I admire. I mean, she has such a strength and enthusiasm, and Claire Saxon. You know, they really lead us to the success of this conference, so I felt very lucky, and many more, you know, many community groups. And it wasn't easy, it was very hard, you know, because we have a very low budget, we all work full-time, so, you know, we have to dedicate extra time. But at the end, when I, you know, was sitting there listening to Arun Gandhi give his speech, was a very touching moment. And in the audience, we have many students from high school who, you know, stand up and ask questions to Reverend Bernice King and Richard Deeds and Gandhi. And that was important, I think. I think that conference couldn't make a difference in their life. It probably did.
You say as you listen to the speakers, what did you feel as a person who comes from Italy and now teaches at the University of Texas, and you had people like those who were speaking, and then you had people like you mentioned who helped get it all together? What was going through your mind and heart?
Well, after many, many years, because I was involved in Italy in this kind of activities, I felt a lot of solidarity. You know, I felt like I belonged to a group. And also I learned a lot, because I wasn't a pacifist, really a true pacifist before. And I think it takes a long time before you become one. I think I have still a long way to go. But I think I learned a lot just sitting there and listening to the speakers and see around me people involved. And I don't know, I felt very good energy and positive.
We were talking before the program that the people in the fine arts and the people in the humanities have really been a part of pushing this peace studies program. And you mentioned particularly the people in the language department, that there is that sense of, you mentioned the word solidarity. Do you remember Dead Poets Society? Did you ever see that movie?
Robin Williams.
Yeah, there's so many interesting things in that program that I thought of, but particularly I liked his idea of getting his students up on the desk. and I'm not saying you should do that as professors, but that whole idea of perspective as a local parish pastor, that's one of the things I like to try to do with my parishioners, to give them that holistic view that this is one world and we're living in this world, and though we have different languages and cultures, that there needs to be that bonding together. And I think that's what that conference last year, nonviolence, global to local options for peace.
Part of what we're trying to do with this conference is to deal with the frustration people had with the Gulf War on both sides, the people who supported the war and people who are opposed to it. I think more and more we have a lot of ambivalence about war. People don't want war. For the most part, in our country and in other countries, and yet people don't feel like there are any options, which is why we focus on the nonviolent option. And we had two people who've inspired us from our heritage. Arun Gandhi, the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, and Bernice King, who's the daughter of Martin Luther King, who are the two towering figures in the 20th century who said, you know, yes, when there's injustice, we need to fight against it. And when there's something we want to stand up against, let's fight. Let's not run away. But there's a way of doing that that's creative rather than destructive.
How do we fight? Well, we want to come back and talk more about the conference. You've given us a history and a background and how this has evolved in this exciting opportunity for the people of Austin. Stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll be right back after this word from Austin Metropolitan Ministries.
Serving Austin means serving you. Each day, Austin Metropolitan Ministries is religion in action, providing affordable housing, caring for the elderly, marching against hunger, and much more. AMM promotes understanding, cooperation, and social involvement. So when we ask for your help, we're really asking to help you, Austin. To find out how you can help Austin Metropolitan Ministries help Austin through its member organizations, just call 472-7627.
Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue. I wanted to share those words attributed to St. Francis with you because the second annual conference on nonviolence here in Austin is dedicated to two people of faith and vision and two people of nonviolence and peace, Frank Wright and Tom Philpott. Les, would you tell our viewers of Austin Faith Dialogue a little bit about Tom and his influence on the community and the university community?
Well, Tom was an important figure in a lot of people's lives. He was something of a prophet in these issues of peace and justice at UT. And in fact, it's too bad that he's not around to see a peace and conflict studies program flourishing, or at least on its way at UT, because he would have been absolutely delighted. He taught courses on peace and justice issues. He taught about problems of the city and racism, and spoke out against war when a lot of people were not doing that, and he did it for years. And he was also my daughter's baseball godfather. He used to take her to Longhorn baseball games. So we miss him for a lot of reasons around our house. But he was the kind of person who was fearless in standing up for his convictions.
He had a commitment to that vision of peace, international peace, local peace, and against violence. And Frank Wright, we were talking before we took the break about the giants you had here last year on the international level. You had Gandhi and King, and their families have always stood throughout the years for peace. But locally we have Tom Philpott, and I knew Frank, and Frank was that type of person, and he touched your life.
Yes, he did. He was an incredible person, he really was. And until the very end, you know, he was with us, he was leading us, giving us direction, and no, he was definitely an important figure.
I think it's important for people watching this program and people who are of the faith communities that are part of this Austin area to realize that there are people like Tom and Frank who have lived out their lives, and that they had this vision, and that the conference, now the second annual conference, is being dedicated to their memory. So let's talk a little bit about it. In the first part of the program, you talked about the history, how the first conference came into being last year. Let's talk about this second conference and what you might see as the goal and the purpose and the direction of the second conference. Tell us about the people who are going to be there. Les, do you want to start?
Okay. Well, we decided to focus on the United Nations, which is kind of interesting for us since we got started in terms of a response to the Gulf War in dealing with these issues at UT in this particular phase. But the United Nations has become such a central figure now, a major actor on the world stage in a way that it hasn't been at all before. And in fact, it was Frank Cooksey who suggested that we focus on the United Nations as a theme for this year's conference to look at ways in which the UN can promote peace and nonviolence, because we're still looking for alternatives to war. In the 60s, we used to just say no war, and now I think we've become much more well sophisticated and practical at the same time. Because we know that we have to find some alternatives. We can't just speak out against it.
There needs to be a vehicle on the world scene, a player on the world scene, and the United Nations, then, is what you're saying, can be that player. Now, there are those people who say the United Nations is no longer an effective tool. I think that'd be an interesting part to bring up in this discussion.
In fact, the conference is like a questionnaire. The United Nations as peacekeeper, can they be peacekeeper? It's a question. It's something that we would like, to find out right there.
So that's important, I think, also. It's not a dogmatic statement in saying that the United Nations is the peacekeeper, but rather you're saying, can it be and will it be as we look into the year 2000 and beyond, as we deal with this issue of violence in our society? Who are some of the other people who are coming to be speakers for the conference?
Well, we have three main keynote speakers coming from the outside as resource people, and they're chosen to raise both the promise and problems of the UN. And first of all, we have Ambassador Awuner, who is head of the delegation from Ghana to the United Nations. And he's, as an ambassador to the UN, he's committed to the UN, in a sense, part of the establishment. Although he also comes from a country that has a sort of Gandhian tradition of nonviolence and is an eloquent speaker and spokesperson for the idea of nonviolence and the potentiality for the United Nations in the world. We also have Barbara Elfbrandt, who is at the Quaker United Nations office, who actually we discovered when we called the Quaker UN office, because we wanted to deal with this issue of the United Nations, and we wanted to find out, what kinds of questions to ask and who we should invite to come speak and so on. In linking the UN and nonviolence issues, we thought one logical place to call is the Quaker UN office. And Barbara Elfbrandt was so helpful and so insightful that we decided to ask her to be one of our speakers as well. And then Richard Dietz, who is from Central Texas, was at last year's conference as a Methodist minister, is working with the Fellowship of Reconciliation and has done training and nonviolence workshops around the world in some really key places. He was at the Philippines, training people in the churches in nonviolent tactics before they overthrew the dictator there. He was in Eastern Europe. He was in the Soviet Union. And all over the world, he's done work in the Middle East in trying to teach people in how to fight nonviolently in terms of looking for these kinds of alternatives that we need so badly.
These three speakers are going to be a part of the Saturday and Sunday presentation of the conference. Now, just like a first child, you always kind of experiment on the first child, and on the second child you know a little bit more. The second conference is different from the first conference, and Antonella, tell us a little bit about how it's different.
Well, it's different, but because for technical, I think, little technical differences, but the format is basically the same, because we were very satisfied with the first conference, especially for the breakout groups, which, they really work greatly on the first conference, and we still have only, I think now we are much better organized, and we are going to have 11 breakout sessions. The year before we had more than that, and it was very hard for the people to attend more than one.
Right.
But this time it's organized in a way in which people can really choose to go to more than one, right? Because it's divided between Saturday and Sunday.
I went to those breakout sessions last year, and I found it to be very exciting because there was give and take between the presenters and the people in the group.
Yes.
So you'll have the breakout sessions, and they'll be, is it not, the conference is smaller this year in terms of days. It's Saturday and Sunday rather than Friday, is that correct? Is
Yes, was Friday. We started on Friday evening and then Saturday.
And also you're involving this year Houston Tillotson. We mentioned that at the beginning of the program, and I think that's also an interesting thing to do, to involve another one of the local educational institutions here in Austin, not just the University of Texas and the community, but now you have Houston Tillotson and University of Texas and the community at large. The first sessions are going to be at Houston Tillotson, is that correct?
Yes, on Saturday,
Okay.
October 23rd, yes.
We thought if we're going to talk about peace at an international level, as well as locally, we need to begin building some of those bridges across. In the sociology department, we call IH-35 the interracial highway 35, because we don't have to look very far to find the kinds of things that breed war in the international community. We have right here in Austin. We have hungry people. We have injustice in our local community. So part of what our attempt to have part of the conference in East Austin and build some bridges with Houston Tillotson and the community, between the community and the universities, and these breakout groups are really sort of the heart of the conference. They serve two functions. There's a teaching function and an action or organizing function. And we're bringing in resource people who've been working in several different areas. Some people who've been doing research and teaching in some of these areas, and trying to get these people together along with other folks from the community. The first part of each breakout session, they'll be very, very short. We're going to be real hard on our presenters to make sure that they're very short in presenting some information, and then we're going to have some interaction and discussion about what can be done in this issue in our community and around the world.
What's it going to cost for people to come to the conference, and how do they go about becoming a part of the conference? Do they call somebody? Where do they go?
Well, in the brochure we are trying to send it to people. We have a return coupon for registration, and we have to ask some money. We need it, of course. And it's, I think we ask $15
$15
for the pre-registration.
For Austin Faith
$20
Dialogue people, less than that, though, right? $15 registration, is that right?
Right.
And
$20 at the door, $15 for pre-registration.
And the dates, again, will be Saturday, October the 23rd, and Sunday, October the 24th. Saturday at Houston Tillotson College, and then Sunday at the LBJ School on the University of Texas campus. Antonella Olson, thank you. Any last words to say about it?
Thank you. I hope this one is going to have as much success as the last one, and everybody will get involved, student, teacher, and community.
Why don't you tell the people in Italian to come, all right? You say, come on.
I'm not a good... Venite a questa conferenza importante.
You're great. Thanks a lot. Les Kurtz, thanks for being with us on the program. We wish you the best, and we'll be there and supporting that. And we want to invite all of you, who are the viewers of Austin Faith Dialogue, to share in this second annual conference on nonviolence, local options, worldwide options for peace in our lives. Let us be people of peace. Thanks for watching. View us again next week. Welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue. Thank you.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.